Christopher Moltisanti is one of the strangest gangsters in The Sopranos because on paper the argument sounds ridiculous. He is mafia. He grows up around the life. He works under Tony Soprano. He commits robberies. He beats people. He kills people. He collects money. He gets made. He has a crew around him. He has a seat at the table. He has the last name, the blood connection, the violence, the ambition, and eventually the title. So when you say Christopher was never a real mafioso, it can sound like you are letting him off the hook. Like the bodies were imaginary. Like the damage did not count. Like Adriana, J.T. Dolan, Emil Kohler, the waiter, the civilians, the victims, and everyone else hurt by Christopher's choices were just part of some sad misunderstanding. They were real victims. Christopher was a real criminal. He was dangerous. He was cruel. He was selfish. He was capable of ruining a person's life in one emotional second. But being a criminal and being built for the mafia are different things. Christopher had the violence, he had the costume, he had the vocabulary, he had the ambition. What he never had was the cold emotional machinery needed to survive inside that world. He wanted the mafia to give him identity, family, respect, purpose, and meaning. The mafia gave him pressure, humiliation, addiction, resentment, and eventually death. Christopher's tragedy is that he spends the whole show trying to become a man this world would respect, while the show keeps revealing that the deeper he goes into the life, the less stable he becomes. He wants to be a gangster legend. He wants to be Tony's heir. He wants people to fear him and admire him. He wants his life to feel like a movie. He wants the pain to mean something. The problem is that the mafia in The Sopranos has no interest in meaning. It runs on money, silence, leverage, and usefulness. Christopher keeps asking it for a soul. That is the first sign that he never truly belonged there. From the beginning, Christopher looks at the mob through fantasy. He has grown up close enough to understand the rules, yet far enough from real power to romanticize it. He talks like someone who has absorbed the mythology before he has absorbed the discipline. He wants the status before he understands the emptiness behind it. When he kills Emil Kohler early in the show, he acts like the murder is part of some larger gangster destiny. He wants recognition for it. He wants Tony to understand that he stepped up. He wants credit. The killing is ugly and stupid and messy, and Christopher treats it like a career milestone. Even the way he handles the body, the panic around it, the anxiety of being noticed, shows the gap between the image in his head and the reality of what he is doing. The murder does not make him feel powerful for long. It makes him nervous. It becomes another thing he has to carry. Christopher's first major problem is that he wants the life to validate him emotionally. A real operator in that world understands that validation is temporary. You get a bump, you get a chair, you get a title, and the pressure increases. Christopher keeps expecting each step to heal something inside him. Each step exposes the wound more clearly. Look at how easily disrespect eats at him. He cannot let small insults pass. He cannot tolerate being laughed at. He cannot stand feeling like the low man in the room. A bakery clerk ignores him, and Christopher shoots him in the foot because he feels invisible. It is pathetic and terrifying at the same time. The act is violent, yet the emotion behind it is childish. He wants the room to recognize him. He wants the world to stop treating him like some kid waiting in line. That scene says a lot about Christopher. He is dangerous because his ego is fragile. He does not hurt people only when there is a plan, or profit, or order from above. He hurts people when he feels small. That pattern follows him everywhere. With Brendan Filone, Christopher wants to seem bold. He wants to move fast. He wants to act like a real gangster before he has earned the patience of one. Brendan is a clown in many ways, and Christopher knows it, yet he still lets that energy pull him toward reckless decisions. They hijack trucks connected to Junior's interests, and the consequences arrive quickly. Brendan dies. Christopher gets a mock execution. The fantasy starts showing its teeth. A different kind of person would take that lesson and become quieter. Christopher becomes more desperate to be respected. That is one of the clearest ways the show separates him from men like Silvio, Furio, or even Patsy. Those characters can be emotional in their private lives, and they all have flaws, yet their violence usually has a colder rhythm. They can wait, they can follow procedure, they can make fear look professional. Christopher's violence is often personal. He explodes from embarrassment, insecurity, jealousy, addiction, wounded pride, or panic. He is brutal, but his brutality leaks. You can see the feelings underneath it. In the mafia, that is dangerous. Feelings create openings. Feelings make you talk. Feelings make you reckless. Feelings make you vulnerable to manipulation. Christopher keeps trying to prove he belongs through violence, and almost every violent act reveals how unstable he is. Tony sees that instability, and Tony also feeds it. The relationship between Tony and Christopher is the center of this whole argument, because Christopher's idea of the mafia is tangled up with his idea of Tony. Tony is his boss, his cousin by marriage, his father figure, his mentor, and eventually his executioner. Christopher wants Tony's approval in a way that goes beyond business. He wants Tony to see him. He wants Tony to love him. He wants Tony to confirm that all this suffering has a purpose. Tony uses that need. Tony does care about Christopher in his own twisted way. That care is real enough to confuse Christopher and poisonous enough to destroy him. Tony sees Christopher as family, and he also sees him as an investment. He imagines Christopher as a younger man who can take pressure off him, absorb risk, and maybe become a loyal successor. Tony likes the idea of Christopher because it lets him build a fantasy around Dicky Moltisanti too. Christopher becomes part of Tony's personal mythology, a living connection to the father figure Tony worshipped. But Christopher is a person, not just a symbol Tony can use. The more Tony pushes him forward, the more Christopher begins to crack. He gets opportunities, yet every opportunity comes with new humiliation. He gets promoted, yet people still laugh at him. He gets made, yet he still feels like the kid they can mock. He gets access to power, yet Tony can still crush him with one look, one insult, one reminder of who is really in control. Christopher wants Tony to be a father. Tony is a boss first. That gap ruins him. The maidman ceremony should be one of the proudest moments of Christopher's life. It is the thing he has wanted. The official entrance, the confirmation, the sacred little ritual that says he finally belongs. And even there, the show surrounds the moment with unease. The ceremony feels smaller than the myth. The room feels cheap. The sacredness feels worn down. Christopher gets the title, but the title cannot fix the person receiving it. He walks into the life officially, and almost immediately, the same insecurities remain. That is one of the strongest ideas in The Sopranos. The mafia sells these men a story about honor and tradition, while the actual world they live in is petty, paranoid, greedy, and emotionally diseased. Christopher believes in the story longer than he should. He believes that being made will change the way he feels. It does not. He still wants love. He still wants applause. He still wants to be seen as special. The life has no cure for that. His addiction becomes the most obvious proof. Christopher's drug use is often discussed as a weakness, and in the context of the mafia, it is absolutely treated that way. It makes him unreliable. It makes him sloppy. It makes him a risk around law enforcement. It makes people question whether he can be trusted. For Tony, the addiction becomes one more reason to see him as a failed project. But the addiction is also the place where Christopher's real pain leaks out. He cannot digest the life. He cannot keep all the violence, shame, resentment, fear sealed inside. Other characters drink, gamble, cheat, eat, rage, and lie to themselves. Christopher uses heroin, alcohol, and whatever else can quiet the noise. His problem is not just that he likes getting high. He is trying to escape the reality of being Christopher Moltisanti. He wants to be a respected gangster, and he hates the life he has to live to get there. The intervention scene captures the dark comedy of that perfectly. On the surface, it is one of the funniest scenes in the series. Everybody gathers to help Christopher, and almost immediately, the room turns into insults, accusations, and violence. They are supposed to be saving him. They end up beating him. The comedy works because the emotional truth is so ugly. These people have no language for real help. They understand shame. They understand dominance. They understand anger. They understand making someone feel weak enough to obey. Christopher's addiction scares them partly because they care, and partly because it threatens business. It exposes the group. It embarrasses them. It reminds them that one of their own cannot function under the weight of the life they all pretend is honorable. Christopher needs treatment. The mafia gives him a beating and calls it love. His sobriety creates another kind of loneliness. When he tries to stay clean, he becomes less useful socially. He cannot hang around the same way. He cannot drink with the guys. He cannot laugh off every disgusting joke. His recovery makes him separate from the group, and separation is deadly in that world. The mafia says it wants him functional, yet it has no respect for the actual process that might make him functional. Tony is especially cruel about it. Tony resents Christopher's sobriety because it makes Tony feel judged. When Christopher refuses a drink, Tony hears an accusation. When Christopher tries to protect himself, Tony sees disloyalty. The healthier Christopher tries to become, the more Tony feels abandoned by him. That is a sick dynamic. The father figure wants the son clean enough to work, damaged enough to remain dependent, and available enough to absorb abuse. Christopher cannot win inside that arrangement. Adriana becomes the clearest example of how badly Christopher is split between the life and something more human. Their relationship is ugly in many ways. Christopher abuses her, he lies to her, he drags her deeper into danger. He uses her love as a place to collapse and as a target for his rage. Adriana is not saved by loving him. Her love becomes one of the reasons she stays close enough to be destroyed. At the same time, Adriana represents something Christopher wants and fears. She offers him a version of life outside the constant performance. She wants him as a partner, not as a soldier. She believes in his movie dreams. She listens to his pain. She sees the insecure person under the gangster act, and for a long time she keeps trying to love that person. When she tells him she has been talking to the FBI, Christopher faces the defining choice of his life. For a moment, escape is possible. He imagines leaving. He imagines giving up the mob. He imagines witness protection. He imagines an ordinary future with Adriana, away from Tony, away from the pressure, away from the role he has spent his life trying to perform. The gas station scene kills that fantasy. Christopher sees a poor family, tired and miserable, living the kind of regular life he thinks witness protection will give him. The father looks drained, the car is packed, the whole image feels suffocating to him. In that moment, Christopher sees normal life as humiliation. No status, no fear, no expensive clothes, no club, no Tony, no mythology. Just survival without the costume. He chooses the mafia. The choice is horrifying because it shows how trapped he really is. He cannot live cleanly inside the mob, and he cannot imagine dignity outside it. He sacrifices Adriana to the life, and the life still does not save him. It only pulls him deeper into the same emptiness. That betrayal is one of the darkest things Christopher ever does. He does not simply fail Adriana. He hands her back to the world that will erase her. He knows enough to understand what will happen. Maybe he does not let himself picture every detail, but he knows. He chooses Tony, the crew, the identity, the chair at the table, and the fantasy of belonging. After Adriana disappears, Christopher has to live with the choice. He can pretend, he can use, he can rage. He can move on with another woman and a baby. The wound remains. The show never lets him become clean from that decision. Adriana's absence stays around him like a ghost. This is also why Cleaver matters so much. On the surface, Christopher's movie dream can look like a joke. A gangster trying to become a screenwriter, the mob guys pretending to understand Hollywood. The absurdity of a horror movie built out of mob resentment. But Cleaver is one of the most honest things Christopher ever creates because he puts his feelings into it in the only way he can. He cannot walk up to Tony and say, "I hate you for how you treated me. I feel used by you. I feel replaced. I think you took the woman I loved. I think you humiliated me and called it mentorship. I think you raised me into this life and despise me for being damaged by it." So he makes a movie. The boss figure in Cleaver is a Tony-shaped monster. The story turns private resentment into genre violence. It becomes a confession disguised as entertainment. Christopher thinks he is being clever, maybe even artistic, but everyone can feel the truth under it. Carmela sees it. Tony sees it. The room sees more than Christopher wants to admit. A colder mobster would bury that resentment. Christopher releases it into the world and sells tickets. That is the artist side of Christopher. He has a real creative impulse, even when the work is crude, immature, and ridiculous. He wants to turn pain into story. He wants his life to be interpreted. He wants an audience. He wants proof that his suffering has shape. The mafia cannot tolerate that either. Art requires exposure. The mob requires concealment. Christopher keeps exposing himself, sometimes through drugs, sometimes through violence, sometimes through confession, sometimes through film, sometimes through a drunken phone call or a desperate conversation with someone who does not want to hear it. JT Dolan becomes the final stop for that side of Christopher. JT is not innocent in every way. He benefits from Christopher. He gets pulled into that orbit. He knows enough to fear him. But by the end, Christopher goes to him because there is almost no one else left. He is drunk, broken, grieving in ways he cannot fully explain, and desperate to be heard. He talks about his friends abandoning him. He talks about the things he has seen and the things he has done personally. He is trying to unload a lifetime of violence onto a civilian who understands exactly how dangerous that confession is. JT says he does not want to hear it. From JT's side, that fear makes sense. Listening to Christopher is not like listening to a regular drunk friend. Christopher's secrets can get people killed. The information itself is dangerous. JT knows that the more Christopher says, the more trapped they both become. But Christopher experiences the refusal as another abandonment. He came looking for a witness, someone to confirm that his pain is real, someone to sit there and absorb the truth that the mafia never allows him to say out loud. JT tries to set a boundary, and Christopher hears rejection. The whole scene becomes the worst version of Christopher's emotional pattern. He wants tenderness, he brings terror, and he punishes the person for reacting to the terror. When JT says, "Chris, you are in the mafia," the fantasy collapses. That line is so devastating because it strips away the self-pity. Christopher wants to be treated as a wounded friend in that moment, yet JT sees the armed gangster in front of him. Christopher wants sympathy for the pain of his life, while the person across from him is afraid of becoming another casualty of it. Christopher kills him because the truth is unbearable. That murder shows Christopher at his most exposed and his most monstrous. He wants someone to see his humanity, and when the person sees the danger instead, Christopher destroys him. It is the entire contradiction of his character in one scene. He is genuinely broken. He is also lethal to anyone near the break. After JT, the image of Christopher trying to fix the uprooted tree carries a strange, quiet sadness. He tries to stand it back up, like something with no roots can simply be placed upright again. It looks like repair, but the foundation is gone. The gesture says more than Christopher could say clearly. He has torn too much out of the ground. He can arrange the surface for a second. The life underneath is dead. By the final stretch of the show, Christopher has become a liability in Tony's mind. Tony no longer sees the future when he looks at him. He sees risk, drugs, resentment, weakness, loose talk, the ghost of Adriana, the insult of Cleaver, the embarrassment of failed mentorship. Tony looks at Christopher and sees a bad investment that keeps reminding him of his own failure. That last car ride is almost casual, and that makes it worse. They are together in a normal way, talking, driving, moving through the night. Christopher is high, the crash happens fast. The baby seat is in the back, damaged by the impact. Christopher is injured, bleeding, vulnerable, and immediately aware of how bad it looks. He knows Tony sees the drugs. He knows Tony sees the baby seat. He knows this is another relapse, another failure, another reason for Tony to look at him with disgust. Tony stares at him and makes a decision. The killing is intimate, quiet, and horrifying. Tony pinches Christopher's nose and watches him die. No ceremony, no speech, no old world code, no grand betrayal scene. Just a boss killing the man he once called family because the man has become too inconvenient to keep alive. Tony later frames it to himself as relief, maybe even mercy. He thinks of the baby seat. He thinks of all the future damage Christopher might have caused. He lets himself believe he removed a danger. There is some practical truth in that. Christopher was dangerous. He could have killed his daughter in that crash. He could have flipped. He could have kept spiraling. But Tony also kills the person who reminds him of too many things he does not want to face. Christopher is the failed son, the failed heir, the failed project, the living proof that Tony's version of love turns people into wreckage. As long as Christopher is alive, Tony has to keep seeing what the life did to him, and what Tony personally did to him. Once Christopher is gone, Tony can turn him into a problem that got solved. The reactions after Christopher's death tell you everything about the world he tried so hard to belong to. People cry, but life continues. The crew mourns in the limited way they can. Tony becomes irritated by the grief because he does not feel it the way he thinks he should. He watches other people react, and his distance from them becomes disturbing. Christopher spent his whole life wanting this family to mean something, and after he dies, the machine keeps moving. He wanted permanence from a world built on replacement. That is the final cruelty of Christopher's story. He gave everything to the mafia. He gave it his youth, his relationships, his sobriety, his conscience, Adriana, JT, his chance at normal life, and finally his body. The life took all of it and still treated him as disposable, so the title works if we understand it correctly. Christopher was real mafia in the legal sense. He was real mafia in the violent sense. He was real mafia to his victims. He was real mafia to the people he scared, hurt, exploited, and killed. Calling him fake should never erase his responsibility. But in the deeper sense, Christopher was never built for that world. He could imitate it. He could perform it. He could dress like it, talk like it, kill for it, and bleed for it. He could sit in the room and wear the title. He could demand respect from civilians and younger guys. He could tell himself that he had finally become the man he was supposed to be. Inside, he was still searching for a father, an audience, a home, and a reason. The mafia does not provide those things. It pretends to. It gives men words like family and honor so they can tolerate greed and murder. Christopher believed the words too much. That belief made him useful for a while, because a man chasing approval can be pushed into almost anything. Eventually, the same belief made him weak in the eyes of the people using him. He wanted Tony to be proud. He wanted Adriana to wait. He wanted the guys to respect him. He wanted Hollywood to recognize him. He wanted addiction to stop hurting. He wanted the blood on his hands to become part of some meaningful story. None of it held. Christopher Moltisanti is tragic because he is guilty and wounded at the same time. The show never asks us to choose one side of that. He can be abused by Tony and still abuse Adriana. He can be emotionally destroyed by the mafia and still destroy innocent people. He can be too human for the life and still too corrupted for normal life. That is why he stays interesting. He is not the secret innocent inside the mob. He is what happens when a damaged person mistakes the mob for salvation. He enters the life looking for identity, and the life gives him a role. He mistakes the role for a self. By the time he understands the difference, almost everything real in him has already been spent. Christopher was made into a gangster. He was never built to survive as one.